Alright, it's Sport and Yarn here, back with another nanotekkit tutorial. Today we're going to be talking about reactors and the most efficient setup. This is the reactor we all use. Yarn figured this one out. Basically, instead of using coolant cells, we're using ice. We use not ice on the outside, but ice on the inside, and we do not put water around it, because that's just obnoxious. So Yarn here will explain basically what we do, how we use it, and the most efficient way to get a reactor to work.
Okay, so first of all, we have a condenser here with infinite ice in it, because we've got the collector next to it. The ice gets pumped into the reactor if it's on, which it isn't now. The lever is turned on, so the timer is not pumping, and the reactor is getting a redstone signal turning it off so that it can't blow up or use up all the ice before we film. Every block in the reactor that has, or every square that has a block of ice in it, can dissipate up to 300 heat per tick. The reactor ticks once per second, not 20 times per second like Minecraft does. And every time it does that, it tries to use up ice, it generates EU, and it generates heat. So if you look in the reactor, you see that we have a 5 by 5 array of uranium cells. Each one of those cells generates 10 EU, as well as 10 EU for each cell next to it. So like this one in the top right is generating 10 by itself, 10 because it's next to this one, and 10 because it's next to this one.
Alright. So that's basically the basics, and we'll show you how to figure out how much EU is actually being calculated. This is probably what I would recommend as the maximum. You can do more, but you're on the risk of blowing up the reactor. But this is probably pretty much the most efficient setup we found without blowing up the reactor. Again, you basically have your collector here, which then gives the EMC to the condenser, which then creates your ice, which then pumps into the reactor, into all these spots. If you want to go ahead and flip it on there, so they can
it's
see.
on.
So you'll see the ice here in just a minute start to fill up. It'll slowly fill up as well as slowly be used, but more ice will pump in than is being consumed for the heat. And then on the side here, we basically just have an HV transformer, because you need to convert it from HV to, or from the higher than HV down to HV, so that it can be used in MFSU. And if you want to go lower, you can connect a MV, LV, and then you can connect it to your machines. We recommend a HV directly to an MFSU, because you're going to get the most amount of energy charging, which I believe is 512, correct?
Yes, that is the max that the MFSU and the glass fiber cable can take.
Exactly.
If you're going to have a cable before the HV transformer, you probably want to use an HV cable, but you don't want a lot of those because you lose a lot of EU for every block that they travel on.
Exactly. We have a couple people who wonder why they're only getting, there's the reactors outputting, say, 512, and they're only getting 200 EU per tick, and that would be why. So basically, this is just the basic setup, so you can see what's going on. We've got the collector again here, collecting, putting EMC into the condenser, which is then pumping. This would be the reactor. So it just pumps ice little by little into there. That's pretty much the basics on that. Now over here, you'll see we have a panel. Now this panel is made up of panel extensions, I believe, and one information panel, if I remember correctly. Now the information panel is the one down here in the bottom center. You can put that anywhere. It just has to be touching the extenders, and has to have a redstone signal, torch, lever, whatever it might be to keep it powered. Basically what you do with that is you can check your EU, heat, a whole bunch of other good stuff with not only your reactor, but with MFSUs, MFEs I believe, and lots of other cool functions. You can also make clocks and miscellaneous other things. But you see that you can actually right click on the panel itself and you can put stuff in there, whereas the extender you cannot. You can also use an electric wrench to rotate them depending on which way you want your screens. So top, bottom, left, right, all that good stuff. Now what we're going to be doing with it is measuring the temperature and the EUs per tick on the reactor. Alright, Yarn has a remote sensor kit here, and we're just going to basically show you how to use that. He's going to go and click on the reactor, I believe.
Okay, so you look up the recipe in the NEI, you right click on the reactor, and it gives you a reactor sensor location card. This is specific to the location this reactor is in, and you can go and put it in the industrial information panel.
That's the bottom center panel here. So you'll see he's put that card in there. He's got 2 range upgraders, which allow you to use the reactor, or you can only go so far with the reactor, or so far away from the reactor with this panel. This will basically extend it so you can have the reactor further away. And I believe they do stack.
Yes, the default without any range upgrades is 8 blocks away from the reactor. Each range upgrade allows 8 more blocks.
Okay.
You can then go in and customize which things you want to show up on the screens, or if you want to go around to the other side so they can see it.
Yep.
I'll go and click some things on and off. Right now, everything is on, but let's say you don't care what melting temperature is. I can just check that off by clicking on it in the menu, and you don't see that anymore. It's helpful if you don't have as big of a screen and you're trying to see everything. Like if it's just on this one teeny little screen, you might only want to see what the current temperature is so that it's bigger.
Okay, and with that, we can also, if you watch the reactor, if you want to go and flip it back, so it's the on-off on there. When we flip off the reactor, you'll see that over there it actually does turn off, and it does tell you, hey, it's off, and what the temperature is, how much remaining on the EU cells you do have. And that's pretty much our basics on reactors. So now with those panels, you can also do time, as I said, MFE, MFSUs, it'll tell you the EUs, how much they have in them, all that good stuff. Okay, and last up to show you, we'll show you thermal monitors. We don't really use thermal monitors because, again, our reactor never overheats. It's another preventative here to a blowing up reactor, which does happen. There's 2 different types of thermal monitors. There's a standard one. I'm not sure, what do they call that, Yarn?
Just thermal monitor and remote thermal monitor.
Okay. So the thermal monitor does not require power, whereas the remote thermal monitor does, because it is a remote not connected to the reactor. What the thermal monitor does is it's going to monitor the temperature of the reactor, and what we have set up here is we have a redstone signal coming off of the thermal monitor connected directly to the reactor. So for instance, right now the temperature of the reactor is at 66. So if I bump this down to 0% heat, it will obviously turn off the reactor because it's too hot. If I put it at, say, 100, you'll see once it gets below 100 degrees, or 100, whatever it is temperature-wise, it'll turn on the reactor. When it gets back up above, it will turn off the reactor. So you can put that at 400 degrees or whatever the blowing up point of the reactor is. And here's basically a remote one. Same thing, it monitors it remotely. It looks like it requires LV power to be powered. It will remotely monitor the temperature of the reactor, and you can have that do the same thing. It can output a redstone signal when it gets too hot, and when that does that, you can connect that to the reactor as well, or connect it to lamps or whatever you want to say, so you know your reactor is getting too hot. I believe you use a temperature kit for that. Is that correct?
Yes, the exact same one that you use in this nice big display here.
Okay. So that's pretty much it. And you'll see, again, once it overheats here, it's off for now. And then once it turns back on and gets to 200 degrees, actually, let's change this to a little higher so you can see that. So at 300 degrees, and you'll see it's above 200 degrees, so it flipped on the lights. Now it's back down below, and when it gets back up above 200, the lights come on, so it'll tell you, hey, something's not right.
And you would probably want to set that at the melting point, because while you see the max heat is much higher, the melting point, when it gets there, random blocks around the reactor start blowing up and turning into lava and fire.
Exactly.
And that can happen to one of the reactor parts, at which point you're screwed, basically.
Exactly.
The max heat goes down and bad stuff, and so you just don't want it to ever get above whatever the melting temperature is.
So in other words, don't blow up your reactors. We've shown you all the tutorials on how not to blow it up, so if you ask us, we're not going to replace your reactor. If it's griefed, on the other hand, let us know, and an op will help you, or a admin will help you. I believe that's it for our video today. If you have any questions, contact us in-game or at our email, nanotekkit.us @gmail.com.
Or leave a comment.
Alright, have a good day.
Bye.